Welcome to part 4 of the book from Krishnamurti, Freedom of the Known. Put your headphones on because this video is made in the crystal clearest ASMR quality. Katz. Now, if you are at all sensitive, at all serious, you will not only be aware of your conditioning, but you will also be aware of the dangers it results in, what brutality and hatred it leads to. Why, then, if you see the danger of your conditioning, don't you act? Is it because you are lazy? Laziness being a lack of energy. Yet you will not lack energy if you see an immediate physical danger like a snake in your path, or a precipice or a fire. Why? Then don't you act when you see the danger of your conditioning. If you saw the danger of nationalism to your own security, wouldn't you act? The answer is you don't see. Through an intellectual process of analysis, you may see that nationalism leads to self-destruction. But there is no emotional content in that. Only when there is an emotional content do you become vital. If you see the danger of your conditioning merely as an intellectual concept, you will never do anything about it. In seeing a danger as a mere idea, there is conflict between the idea and acting, and the conflict takes away your energy. It is only when you see the conditioning and the danger of it immediately, and as you would see a precipice, that you act. So seeing is acting. Most of us walk through life intuitively reacting, unthinkingly according to the environment in which we have been brought up. And such reactions create only further bondage, further conditioning. But the moment you give your total intention to your conditioning, you will see that you are free from the past completely, that it falls away from you naturally. Consciousness, the totality of life, awareness. When you become aware of your conditioning, you will understand the whole of your consciousness. Consciousness is the total field in which thought functions and relationships exist. All motives, intentions, desires, pleasures, fears, inspirations, longings, hopes, sorrows, joys are in the field. But we have come to devise this consciousness into the active and the dormant, the upper and lower levels, that is all the daily thoughts, feelings and activities on the surface, and below them the so-called subconsciousness, the things with which we are not familiar, which express themselves occasionally through certain intimations, intuitions and dreams. We are occupied with one little corner of consciousness, which is most of our life. The rest, which we call the subconsciousness, with all its motives, its fears, its wrestle and inherited qualities, we do not even know how to get into. Now I'm asking you, is there such a thing as subconsciousness at all? We use that word very freely. We have accepted that there is such a thing, and all the phrases and jargon of the analytics and psychologists have seeped into the language, but is there such a thing? And why is it that we give such extraordinary importance to it? It seems to me that it is as trivial and stupid as a conscious mind, as narrow, bigoted, conditioned, anxious, and tawdry. So is it possible to be totally aware of the whole field of consciousness and not merely a part, a fragment of it? If you are able to be aware of the totality, then you are functioning all the time with your total attention, not partial attention. This is important to understand, because when you are being totally aware of the whole field of consciousness, there is no friction. It is only when you divide consciousness, which is also feeling and action, into different levels, that there is friction. We live in fragments. You are one thing at the office, another at home. You talk about democracy, and in your heart you are authoritic. You talk about loving your neighbors, yet kill him with competition. There is one part of you working, looking independently of the other. Are you aware of this fragment existing in yourself? And is it possible for a brain that has broken up its own functioning, its own thinking into fragments? Is it possible for such a brain to be aware of the whole field? Is it possible to look at the whole of consciousness completely, totally, which means to be a total human being? If in order to try to understand the whole structure of the me, the self, with all its extraordinary complicity, you go step by step, uncovering layer by layer, examining every thought, feeling, and motive, you will get caught up in the analytical process, which may take you weeks, months, or even years. And when you admit time into the process of understanding yourself, you must allow for every form of distortion, because the self is a complex entity, moving, living, and struggling, wanting, denying, with pressures and stresses and influences of all sorts conditionally at work on it. So you will discover for yourself that this is not the way. You will understand that the only way to look at yourself is totally, immediately, without time. And you can see the totality of yourself only when the mind is not fragmented. What you see in totality is the truth. Now, can you do that? Most of us cannot, because most of us have never approached the problem so seriously, because we have never really looked at ourselves. Never. We blame others, We explain things away, or we are frightened to look. But when you look totally, you will give your whole attention, your whole being, everything of yourself, your eyes, your ears, your nerves. You will attend with completely self-abandonment, and then there is no room for fear, no room for contraction, and therefore no conflict. Attention is not the same thing as contraction. Concentration is exclusion. Attention, which is total awareness, include nothing. It seems to me that most of us are not aware, not only of what we are talking about, but of our environment. The colors around us, the people, the shape of trees, the clouds, the movement of water. Perhaps it is because we are so concerned with ourselves, with our own pretty little problems, our own ideas, our own pleasures, pursuits and ambitions, that we are not objectively aware. And yet, we talk a great deal about awareness. Once in India, I was traveling in the car. There was a chauffeur driving, and I was sitting beside him. There were 3 gentlemen behind, discussing awareness very intently and asking me questions about awareness, and unfortunately, at that moment the driver was looking somewhere else and he ran over a goat. And the 3 gentlemen were still discussing awareness, totally unaware that they had run over a goat. When this lack of attention was pointed out to those gentlemen who were trying to be aware, it was a great surprise to them. And with most of us, it is the same. We are not aware of outward things or of inward things. If you want to understand the beauty of a bird, a fly or a leaf, or a person with all his complexities, you have to give your whole attention, which is awareness. And you can give your whole attention only when you care, which means that you really love to understand. Then you give your whole heart and mind to find out. Such awareness is like living with a snake in the room. You watch its every movement. You are very, very sensitive to the slightest sound it makes. Such a state of attention is total energy. In such awareness, the totality of yourself is revealed in an instant. When you have looked at yourself so deeply, you can go much deeper. When we use the word deeper, we are not being comparative. We think in comparisons, deep and shallow, happy and unhappy. We are always measuring, comparing. Now, is there such a state as the shallow and the deep in ourselves? When I say my mind is shallow, petty, narrow and limited, how do I know all these things? Because I have compared my mind with your mind, which is brighter, has more capacity, is more intelligent and alert. Do I know my pettiness without comparison? When I am hungry, I don't compare that hunger with yesterday's hunger. Yesterday's hunger is an idea, a memory. If I am all the time measuring myself against you, struggling to be like you, then I am dying what I am myself. Therefore, I am creating an illusion. When I have understood that comparison in any form leads only to great illusion and greater misery, Just as when I analyze myself, add to my knowledge of myself bit by bit, or identify myself with something outside myself, whether it be the state, a savior, or an ideology, when I understand that all such processes lead only to greater conformity and therefore greater conflict, when I see all this, I put it completely away. Then my mind is no longer seeking. It is very important to understand this. Then my mind is no longer groping, searching, questioning. This does not mean that my mind is satisfied with things as they are, but such a mind has no illusion. Such a mind can then move in a totally different dimension. The dimension in which we usually live, the life of every day, which is pain, pleasure, and fear, has conditioned the mind, limited the nature of the mind, and when that pain, pleasure, and fear have gone, which does not mean that you no longer have joy. Joy is something entirely different from pleasure. Then the mind functions in a different dimension, in which there is no conflict, no sense of otherness. Verbally, we can go only so far. What lies beyond cannot be put into words, because the word is not the thing. Up to now, we can describe, explain, but no words or explanations can open the door. What will open the door is daily awareness and attention. Awareness of how we speak, what we say, how we walk, what we think. It is like cleaning a room and keeping it in order. Keeping the room in order is important in one sense, but totally unimportant in another. There must be order in the room, but order will not open the door or the window. What will open the door is not your violation or desire. You cannot possibly invite the other. All that you can do is to keep the room in order, which is to be virtuous for itself, not for what it will bring, to be sane, rational, orderly. Then, perhaps if you are lucky, the window will open and the breeze will come in. Or it may not. It depends on the state of your mind, and that state of mind can be understood only by yourself, by watching it and never trying to shape it, never taking sides, never opposing, never agreeing, never justifying, never condemning, never judging, which means watching it without any choice. And out of this choiceless awareness, perhaps the door will open, and you will know what the dimension is, in which there is no conflict and no time. Pursuit of pleasure, desire, perversion by thought, memory, joy. We said in the last chapter that joy was something entirely different from pleasure. So let us find out what is involved in pleasure and whether it is at all possible to live in a world that does not contain pleasure, but a tremendous sense of joy, of bliss. We are all engaged in the pursuit of pleasure in some form or other. Intellectual, sensuous, or cultural pleasure. The pleasure of reforming, telling others what to do, of modifying the evils of society, of doing good. The pleasure of greater knowledge, greater physical satisfaction, greater experience, greater understanding of life, all the clever, cunning things of the mind, and the ultimative pleasure is, of course, to have God. Pleasure is the structure of society. From childhood until death, we are secretly cunning or obviously proposing pleasure. So whatever our form of pleasure is, I think we should be very clear about it because it is going to guide and shape our lives. It is therefore important for each one of us to investigate closely, hesitantly and delicately this question of pleasure, for to find pleasure and then nourish and sustain it is a basic demand of life, and without it, existence becomes dull, stupid, lonely, and meaningless. You may ask why then should life not be guided by pleasure? For the very simple reason that pleasure must bring pain, frustration, sorrow, and fear, and out of fear, violence. If you want to live that way. Most of the world does anyway. But if you want to be free from sorrow, you must understand the whole structure of pleasure. To understand pleasure is not to deny it. We are not condemning it or saying it is right or wrong. But if we propose it, let us do so with our eyes open, knowing that a mind that is all the time seeking pleasure must inevitably find its shadow and pain. They cannot be separated. Also we run after pleasure and try to avoid pain. Now, why is the mind always demanding pleasure? Why is it that we do noble and ignoble things with uncurrent of pleasure? Why is it we sacrifice and suffer on the thin thread of pleasure? What is pleasure and how does it come into being? I wonder if any of you have asked yourself the question and follow you the answer to the very end. Pleasure comes into being through 4 stages: perception, sensation, content, and desire. I see a beautiful motor car. Say, then I get sensation, a reaction from looking at it. Then I touch it or imagine touching it. And then there is a desire to own and show myself off in it. Or I see a lovely cloud or a mountain clear against the sky. Or a leaf that has just come in springtime. Or a deep valley full of loveliness and splendor. Or a glorious sunset, or a beautiful face, intelligent, alive, not self-conscious, and therefore no longer beautiful. I look at these things with the intense delight, and as I observe them, there is no observer, but only sheer beauty like love. For a moment I am absent with all my problems, anxieties and miseries. There's only that marvelous thing. I can look at it with joy and the next moment forget it. Or else the mind steps in and then the problem begins. My mind thinks over what it has seen and thinks how beautiful it was. I tell myself I should like to see it again many times. Thought begins to compare, judge and say, I must have it again tomorrow. The continuity of an experience that has given delight for a second is sustained by thought. It is the same with sexual desires or any other form of desires. There is nothing wrong with the desires. To react is perfectly normal. But then, thought steps and chews over the delight and turns it into pleasure. Thought wants to repeat the experience, and the more you repeat, the more mechanical it becomes. The more you think about it, the more strength thought gives it to pleasure. So thought creates and sustains pleasure, thought desire, and gives it conditionality. And therefore, the natural reaction of desire to any beautiful thing is perverted by thought. Thought turns it into a memory, and memory is nourished by thinking about it over and over again. Of course, memories has a place at a curtain level. In every life, we could not function at all without it. In its own field, it must be efficient, but there is a state of mind where it has a very little place. A mind which is not crippled by memories has real freedom. This was part 4 from the book Freedom of the Known from Krishnamurti. There was a nice part. I really need to think about. And this is the question about pleasure. This is actually a thing I am absolutely all the time confronted with, and what have a big impact of my life, not just in a sexuality way. If anyone knows my other side, anuskatzz, they know what I'm talking from. It's about a lot of things in my life. This with the car was a very nice explanation from Krishnamurti, and I am absolutely there to think about this fact and ask me the question, why? And I invite you to take your time while listening to the book and be open for it to take your time to confront yourself with it when you like. I will read the full book, Freedom of the Unknown, in different parts. And last but not least, I will also put them all together so you can hear them in a full version video. But I think it is very good to have the parts to really recognize and to repeat, to evolve and think about it. And even when you don't understand something so good, you can just click on the video again and listen at a second or third or a lot, often you like, to understand. My name is ASMR Katz, and I am a tattooed girl who wants to show you the amazing world of sound. I use ASMR as a tool to trigger you and put your tingles on. As well, I am more than happy when you support me, subscribe or follow me. And every Wednesday and Sunday I will upload a new ASMR click here. So feel free to click on the notification bell as well to get the latest updates. If you like this little clip, then feel free to comment under it why, and let me know if you have some idea or thoughts for the future, because I really like interaction in my community. If you are curious, I have way more clips waiting for you, so feel free to scroll through my video timeline and see all of them. They are all there to give you different triggers and tingles with different sounds. Doesn't matter if I read, I eat, or I make some amazing sounds you might never heard before.